الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض أعدت للمتقين الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين. وسارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض أعدت للمتقين الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم ذكروا الله فاستغفروا لذنوبهم ومن يغفر الذنوب إلا الله ذكروا الله فاستغفروا لذنوبهم ومن يغفر الذنوب إلا الله ومن يغفر الذنوب إلا الله ولم يصروا على ما فعلوا وهم يعلمون ومن يغفر الذنوب إلا الله ولم يصروا على ما فعلوا وهم يعلمون أولئك جزاؤهم مغفرة من ربهم وجنات وجنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها. أولئك جزاؤهم مغفرة من ربهم وجنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ونعم أجر العاملين. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتحدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله أعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. I first of all would like to send my condolences to all of you on the shahadat of Bibi Sakina salamullah alayha and the 30th day after the day of Ashura. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to give us this blessing of azadari, not just to grieve for the Ahlul Bayt, but also to learn from them and to apply their principles into our life, inshallah. My discussion with all of you out there in Virginia last night was about shaitan. And it's a classic topic. I know a lot of people have spoke about that, but the approach that I wanted to take was that in order for us to understand the tactics of the external shaitan, it might give us a little bit of a trigger or catalyst to think about our inner shaitan. And I talked about that yesterday, how we all have, the potential now to be, of course, the Khalifa of Allah, the Vicegerent of Allah, or we have the potential to be the awliya of shaitan. And so we all have a hidden, internal racist, a bigot, an elitist, a nafs ammara. And if we choose with our free will now, if we choose to empower and embolden these elements, then of course we become the awliya of shaitan. If we choose to repress them and suppress them and weaken them inside of us to the part where they become almost ineffective for us, then we begin the journey and the suluk towards the khilafat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we examined last night through the Quran, through the verses of Surah al-Araf, the idea of shaitan's tactics and his conversation with Allah, how he had a chance now to really truly explain his actions against the order of Allah to bow down to Adam. And, he reduced the entire conversation to nothing but a physical one. And I want to further along and further these verses. And again, I'll ask you if you can follow along with me on your devices or wherever you are right now, sitting in the comfort of your home. The Quran, verses I want to look at is Surah al-Araf, verses 14 all the way down to 17. And today I really want to focus on verse number 17. We talked about yesterday how Shaitan now, on his way out of the garden of Allah, says, فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي, I actually blame you for this. And again, I want myself to look at this discussion not as me, understanding Shaitan, but do I sometimes adopt the tactics of Shaitan, albeit at a very, very low percentage? I'm not challenging God. I'm not, but this idea of, judging others based on external looks, or the idea of blaming others for my own deficiency. Shaitan chose not to bow down to Adam. It was his choice. It's his repercussion, but he took it off of his shoulders and placed it on God. And then the verse right after, the very famous verse that really requires an entire ashra to understand. But I want to talk about one very important factor tonight, and I'm only with you for 2 nights. Tonight, of course, is the final one. Before I do that, I forgot one thing, and I want to make sure I get that, and that is the request for a Surah Fatiha. I was going to do it at the end, but I think I might forget at the end, so it's better if I just do it now, inshallah. So bear with me. If you can please join me in reciting a Surah Fatiha for your marhumin and for mine, of course, and for the following marhumin: Mirza Asghar Raza Beg, Sabra Begum, Muhammad Ali, Afsar Jahan, inshallah. فاتحة بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صل على وتفسر الناس لا صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. I'm sorry, it's one of the things that I'm really bad at, is that I have to remind myself that there was a Fatiha list to be recited, and I don't know what it is always. Even when I go live to certain places, if someone gives me a piece of paper, I don't put it in my pockets. I know I'm going to forget. I actually hold on to it so I'm reminded. Anyways, so I don't mean any disrespect to the families of the marhumin. May Allah elevate the status of your marhumin and accept, inshallah, the sponsoring of tonight's majlis. So Surah al-Araf, verse number 17. Let's start there. Now, going based on yesterday's episode and discussion, is that Shaitan now is on his way out of the garden. Allah is very upset. And then this is where Shaitan now very boldly describes exactly what he's going to do in terms of his misguidance. Okay, and even these verses are, I tell you, a huge blessing from Allah himself. To identify your enemy, to know his tactics, to know where he's coming from, is a blessing for someone who is at war with the enemy. Right? Think about it. If you get privy to information where you talk about, okay, what from which side the enemy will attack, how they'll attack, then that makes your preparation of defense a little bit better, right? Allah now is not only announcing that Shaitan is your open enemy. This is the conversation that he decides now to reveal as one of his verses, warning us, telling us ultimately, look, not only is it going to be an ambush, but it's going to be a very specific way that he's going to attack you. That needs to be understood. Now, all of this is inside of a metaphysical realm, right? So the verse reads, ثُمَّ لَأَتِيَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ. Okay. وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرِهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. That I am going to certainly come to them, misguide them, meaning your creation, those who are on what? Siratikal mustaqim, as I said yesterday, the verse that's previous, that those who are on the path of yours, who are moving towards you, who are on this sulukin journey towards you, I'm going to actually come from them from four sides. And you've heard this before. From in front of them, from behind them, from their right and from their left. Each of them is a metaphysical and a metaphorical avenue of guidance. It's not like Shaitan is standing there physically in front of us and then, oh, I'm behind you, I'm to your right. No, of course not. So these have to be understood, explained, and Tafsir, of course, does a beautiful job. I don't have the time in one majlis tonight to explain all four. It wouldn't do it justice. I do want to make sure that I explain one thing, and that's from behind us. How does Shaitan misguide us from behind us? It's a huge discussion and one that's very, very important. But he says, I will misguide them from the front, from the back, from the right, from the left, and you will find majority of them to be ungrateful. Okay? لا تجد أكثرهم شاكرين. You will find majority of them to be unthankful. Now, it's very interesting to note that he mentions this idea, Shaitan, of gratefulness in this verse. That, why is it that he felt the need of all the things that the insan can or can't be, this idea of shukr and being a shakir, being thankful. Why did he feel the need to explain that? Maybe, just maybe, Tafsir says, it points to the importance of gratitude. A concept the Western world has really kind of latched onto now as, the go-to avenue of dealing with mental health. And well, it should. It is a beautiful concept that the Deen actually presented 1400 years ago. To be thankful. And here Shaitan is almost as if saying that, those who are going to be prey to my deceit are those who will be ungrateful. Meaning, now in brackets and in between the lines, if you are thankful, part of the effect of that thankfulness is the effect of Shaitan will be less on you. Okay? That's why the end of that verse number 17 is very, very important. وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرِهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. You'll find that the majority of them are not thankful. I mean, the ones who are thankful are a little bit less impacted by my front, back, right, left approach. Now, as I mentioned, unfortunately, and I don't want to upset anybody, I won't be able to cover all four. I do want to talk about how Shaitan does it from the back. Metaphorically from the back, talks about the idea of self-forgiveness. Okay, from the back, meaning that he misguides us by us constantly focusing on our past. And we, as I often say, we pave the path of our future sometimes, incorrectly. We pave the path of our future with the mistakes we've done in our past. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we just don't know how to forgive ourselves. We don't. We don't know how to do some self-love, some self-care, some self-forgiveness. Okay? And in this Western world, and this idea, especially during this pandemic now, where people are really going through some mental health anxieties, we just don't know it sometimes. A lot of the solution for that is a little bit of self-care and self-love. If that means, you read, if that means you go for a walk, if that means that you have your outlet, so be it. If you write, some are writers, whatever the case may be, find that outlet and begin to take care of yourself. Now here's the problem. The problem is that a lot of you guys and a lot of my youth out there who are listening to me right now may sit there and tell me that, said, Asad, you have no idea what I did in high school. The very famous verse of Surah Baqarah, verse number 186, that's in some tafsir it's called the verse of love, and well, it should be. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةِ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. That when they ask you about me, he's talking to the Holy Prophet, when my servants ask you about me, tell them فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. I'm very near. I'm very near. We sometimes think that I have to shout my du'as out, to go to the peak of the mountain and shout out my du'as. Or sometimes I sit on the musalla and whisper from my hearts. And here this dua is, this verse is telling us that you don't need to find the highest peak of the highest mountain to scream out your du'as. I have never left your side that you need to scream for me to listen to you. A whisper will do. A najwa, a munajat is enough. Munajat, from najwa to whisper, is enough. But the portion right after from 186 of Surah Baqarah, where Allah says, I will answer the call of the caller. أجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعان. I will answer the call of the caller, whoever that caller is. There's no shart, there's no qaid, it's kind of a mutlaqan idea. It's any caller at all. If you come to me with Allah to call upon me whenever you call upon me, if you are sincere upon calling me, I will answer your call. إذا دعان, whenever you call. Whenever you call. And if that means that after 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, for those 10 months now, we've denied Allah, ridiculed Allah, been angry at God, rejected God, moved away from God, and then 10 months later, a tragedy, God forbid, a diagnosis, a divorce, a miscarriage, a death in a family, a spiritual journey to Hajj, doesn't matter, whatever it is, caused me now to say, well, what am I doing for the past 10 months? I need to go back towards Allah. Know from this verse alone that whenever you call upon Allah with a sincere heart, Allah will say labbaik to your call. Allah will answer your call. Whenever you're ready. Doesn't mean that we play games with Allah. Deceive, believe. He's in the corner whenever I need him. Bring it. No. I mean, remember, he's the master, you're the slave. But sometimes I think, I'm sorry to say that, we have it flipped. I have it flipped. He's the slave and I'm the master. Right? I ask Allah for something. I expect him to have that ready for me in the morning. We have all these du'as, right? I want a child, but by the time I'm this old, I want to be married, my business, blah, blah, blah. The dua is no problem. The problem is when we set our timelines on them. Allah, April 2021 would be a beautiful time for a child. Please make it happen. April comes and goes. May comes and goes. No sign of a child. I knew I shouldn't have asked you. Wait a second. Now, asking wasn't the problem. Dictating to God when you think it's best for you to have that dua was the problem. If you've done your part in asking, then trust his system and his part in what? In answering your call. Okay? But this verse is beautiful. Basically what he's saying is that whenever you want to hit the reset button with me, I'm there. Look, I'll give you a very simple example. I've given it before, right? I arrive in Virginia, let's say, for example. Okay? Let's say, for example, Sayyid Suleiman makes another mistake and invites me. He already made this mistake in inviting me to speak. Now he makes another mistake and actually invites me to arrive in Virginia. So I land in Virginia, I grab my rental car, for example, and I make it to wherever I'm staying. I have no idea where I'm staying. He sends me the address. I pop it in my GPS. It's in my destination, and it tells me, okay, here you go. Go ahead. This is your route. You will arrive at this time. Now, I'm driving along, for some reason I can't read the signs that well. I go south on a highway, on a freeway, instead of going north. What does the GPS do right away? Rerouting. Okay? It'll make me get off the highway, make a couple of rights, a couple of lefts. It'll take me back to the point of deviation where I was going well, and then I deviated. It'll take me back to that point. And if I make 15 wrong turns in the entire journey from the airport to where I'm staying, it'll reroute me 15 different times. Provided I don't change the destination. God's no different. Provided he is always our destination in our du'as, in our akhirat, in our grave, in our contentment, in our worship, in our love for others, everything is God. If we make wrong turns, bad turns, U-turns, pull over, stop, he'll reroute us 1,000 times, provided that destination no longer becomes something else besides God. Hadith says that when we are asked in the grave, who is your Lord? Some will take 700 years to answer that question. Who is your Lord? Who is your Lord? Because the one that we've made our Rabb in this world will be etched into our soul. That soul will carry us into the grave. That soul will answer. Not what my grade 4 dunya teacher told me, that your Lord is Allah. That's easy enough on paper. But in the heart of my hearts, in the kernel of my kernels, do I understand truly that my Rabb is Allah, right? That has to happen before we enter the grave in this world. Anyways, my point in all of this is that the biggest problem that we have sometimes, especially amongst our youth, is that we just don't know how to forgive ourselves. And then we become angry. We become jaded. We become bitter. And we think, you know what? I'm in this predicament now because everything I messed up when I was in high school. But I was in that predicament because of A, B, and C. Right? Didn't have a good dunya teacher. My parents, introduced me to a God of fear, not a God of love. I had these aunties and uncles at the center that would sit there and just judge me. Why aren't you pregnant yet? And why are you getting darker? And why, why are you dressed this way? And blah, 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 and this and that. I asked one sheikh or one sayyid one question. I didn't like the answer he gave me. All of these elements now make me move away from God, right? And make me kind of be the rebel that I was in grade 10, grade 11, or senior in high school, whatever the case may be. And now that I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, on the brink of starting a family, let's say, for example, I have all this baggage I don't know what to do with, right? I've begged Allah, Shabi Qadr, Astaghfirullah 70 times, 100 times. I've done all that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I don't feel light for some reason. And then on top of that, I believe that it's God that's not forgiving me. That, of course, doubles my anger. You talk about Rahman ar-Rahim, you're not forgiving me. Wait a second. Hold on one sec. Okay? We have, for some odd reason, I have no idea where this comes from. I really don't know. We've convinced ourselves that God only listens to the infallible. We've convinced ourselves that God only answers the call of the pious. We've convinced ourselves that God only answers the call of the sinless. And the reason why my du'as are not getting answered, the reason why my life is in complete shambles right now is because I'm a man of sin. I'm a woman filled with sin. And God hasn't forgiven me. Otherwise, I would be flying towards Allah like A, B, and C are right now. Meanwhile, He's forgiven us for everything that we've done. The reason why I brought that 186 verse now in front of you was to remind you and remind myself the amount of sheer love that Allah has for you. And remember, when you have a person that loves you that much in your life, they're very easily someone who forgives you. Very easily. You think about, for example, your mother. It's a very simple example. Again, I told you, I'm not a philosopher like Sayyid Sulaiman is. I'm a very simple man. Simple man. I think back to how many times I upset my mother. And I, just did things that, whatever the case may be. But if I was to turn around and say, Mom, I want this from you, the next day, sometimes within the hour, she'll give it to me. In that angry state, she'll give it to me. If I go and I buy her flowers, I say, Mom, Dekhi, I'm sorry, please. She'll forgive me. It's okay, beta. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. Leave it. It's okay. You're okay. Right? That's a mom. Right? And we accept that from, and we expected that from Mom as well. But for some reason, God has this image in our head of this unforgiving, unaccepting, very hard to impress God. And therein lies the khulasa and summary of the deceit of shaitan. If I was to take these four paths, right? The front, the back, the right, the left, and summarize them into one. What is that one plan of shaitan for all of us? It's to infiltrate our hearts and our mind and change the image of God inside of us. Now, God, who from the very first outset now introduces himself to the Holy Prophet in the cave of Hira in the very first revelation on the 27th of Rajab as what? As his Rabb. Not even Allah, not even Aziz and Qahar and Qad. No, none of that. He says, read, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord. If I had time, I'd explain what Rabb means. Rabb is a very endearing, loving term that has so many things built into it, right? A murabbi of yours is obsessed with your growth, wants to see you grow, sits there and tells you what elements you need to grow. Okay, a mun'im is someone who gives you blessings. Allah is not only a Rabb, but within that Rabb, He is a murabbi, He is a murshid, He is a mun'im, He's all these things. He is a nurturer, He's a flourisher, He's a bestower. All these things are built into Rabb, and He chooses that word, that two-letter word, Ra and Ba, to introduce Himself to His Habib of Allah, the Holy Prophet, and through the verse of the Quran, introduce Him to us through that endearing term. Tells us 10 times a day, say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In Surah Al-Hamd, after the first ayat, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. 20, 30 times a day, the merciful, the beneficent, the merciful, the beneficent, time and time again. And yet that's all lip service, but hasn't quite descended onto the heart. How can you believe that God is a God of the grudges? He doesn't hold grudges, God. You turn to him with half a heart and half of sincerity and half of regret, and he forgives you. The hadith says he forgives you to the point where the sin never happened. Allahu Akbar. The sin never happened. He's not like me. I forgive you, but ooh, baby, I don't forget. I locked that up here. May of 1990, man, you did this again to me. Right now it's 2020. This is 30 years later now. You're making the exact same mistake. I got a lot in my brain, homie. 30 years ago, you're the one that made the exact same. Whoa, I thought you forgave me. Oh, God says no. It's like that dot on the white paper no longer exists. The problem is that we don't know how to forgive ourselves. So I carried this weight of all these skeletons and all that. And I tried to move towards Allah, and I can't, man. The weight is too much, so I give up. I said, forget. I can't do it. I can't climb this mountain of God with 800 pounds of my high school years and all those mistakes I've made, thinking that that's what God wants me. God doesn't want you to do that. God doesn't want you to do that. I've given this example before. You have this massive windshield in front of you when you drive. You have a small rear view mirror. It's this big. The rear view mirror. The windshield is 10 times the size. That the way a car is made is telling us all these signs. The signs are everywhere. That look, yes, while it's important to know what's behind you, what's more important than that is to know what's in front of you. Nobody drives like this, looking in the rearview mirror. Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, I hit that raccoon. I hit that garbage bag. I hit that can. I hit that bump. Ooh, I hit that puddle really badly. Meanwhile, there's all these hurdles up ahead that we keep hitting into. No one does that. Don't pave your future with the mistakes of the past. Now, I'm not telling you to sit there and condone your mistakes or condone my sins or somehow justify them. No, own up to them. Go to Allah. Say, God, I am regretful for what I've done, right? You don't need to be ma'soom. My youth out there, you don't need to be ma'soom to pray to Allah's forgiveness. You don't need to be Mr. Piety. If you're struggling with your deen and you're struggling with rock bottom and right now you just can't figure anything out, nothing makes sense to you. I was never taught the deen properly, Sayyid. I want to start from scratch. I'm turning towards Allah. Allah, please send me a light. Send me something. Don't assume he's turned a blind eye to you. He hasn't. Or turned deaf to you. He hasn't. Ujibu da'wati da'i idha da'an. Whenever they call upon me, I'll answer their call. But come to me sincerely. Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam says half of tawbah is regrets. Sometimes we sin, there's not an ounce of remorse. Oh, everyone does it. It's okay. I do this and do that. If I do these little white sins, it's not a big deal, right? And therein lies shaitan's success. We have to learn to self-care, self-forgive, self-love. Now, how do I know, Sayyid? How do I know that I'm forgiven? How do I know? How can I do this? There's signs. First of all, why are we doubting? My question to myself is that when did God ever sit there and tell you that he won't forgive you? I remember I love kids sometimes. I was in this Sunday school class in the U.S. I think it was years and years ago, and I teach my own center here on Sundays. I have one class of 12 and 13-year-olds, 11 and 12-year-olds, and one class is of the high school guys. Anyways, I had one kid in one class that I taught in the U.S. years and years ago. Right, he must have been 11 or 12 years old. A beautiful generation, I tell you. It's very bold, very in your face, very direct, no filters. Sometimes I love to know what's in their mind. When you get a little bit older, 15, 16, they clamp up and they shut down on you. But 11, 12 years old, they ask me all sorts of questions. I remember I was talking about, qibla of salat, how to find out the qibla, and it's important, blah, blah, blah. And of course, I was waiting for it. One guy asked me, if I'm on the moon and I pray salat, where do I face? And I go, look, you get to the moon and call me from there. I'll let you know what's going on, right? I talked about masa in someone's head, right? So, what if you're bald, and what if you have half a scalp and half a head, and what if your head's chopped off? How do you do masa on a chopped off head? I go, look, if your head is chopped off, give me a call. I'll figure it out for you. Those kind of questions. So one day, one kid just, I guess he's angry. He goes, look, I'm sorry, Maulana, God's made prayer wajib on me. God's made fasting wajib on me. God's made khums wajib. God's made hajj wajib on me. All these things, on me. What about him? What's wajib on him? Who's making anything wajib on him? And now, if this was my parents' generation, and if any parent had heard this, it'd be blasphemous. But the museum, how could he? It's a great question. And Allah Himself has answered inside the Quran. كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ رَحْمَةً. He has made upon Himself, kataba yani wajaba, He has made upon Himself, wajib what? Rahmah and mercy. It's wajib on Him to forgive you, provided all the conditions are there. Doesn't need you to grovel, doesn't need you to sit there, and he doesn't like you to, it's not like, okay, you know what, do this and do that. No, it's not some game. It's not like he's sitting there saying, oh, this is great, look at him grovel, look at him beg. No, of course not. Of course not. When are we going to move away from the God of fear, the God of serpents, the God of crushing the bones in the grave, to a God of love and compassion and mercy and forgiveness and endearment? And when is that transition going to happen? Because when that happens, then self-love and self-care happens all by itself. And then we actually become proud of the fact that I have enslaved myself to you, God. Then that pride comes in. Then we proudly are subservient towards Allah. It's a very odd statement. I'm proud to be a slave. So that in that one statement, you have the self-pride and you have the subservience of a slave. Proud to be your servant. With the utmost confidence, I say, Subhana Rabbil A'la wa bihamdih. Only happens when you self-forgive and self-love. Let go of your past, man. That's not you when you're 16 years old. You've changed now. You've evolved. And therein lies the sign of forgiveness, is change, is evolvement, is I'm a different person. You put me in that environment, knowing what I know now, I won't make those same mistakes, right? How can I judge change, Maulana? How can I make sure I've made that change? It's very simple sometimes, is that we have to identify triggers of certain actions, okay? Hear me out here. In the world of akhlaq, we talk about sin, guna, this mistake, that sin, that transgression, and those are all great, but they are sometimes only effects of triggers, right? When we are in a certain environment, we end up sinning. When I'm with this person, I sin. When I watch this, I sin. All those are triggers to the sin. The triggers are here, the sin happens by themselves. Remove the triggers, the sin by itself is gone. What we're doing is that we keep saying astaghfirullah, sin happens again. Astaghfirullah, sin happens. Astaghfirullah, sin happens again. The problem is, as long as the triggers are here, the sin is here. These are my hand puppets. You see them? As long as the triggers are here, the sin will be here. Remove the triggers, identify the triggers. Now, how do I know that I have changed and been forgiven? Okay, hear me out here. My youth, my young guys who are with me right now, please follow me. The triggers are still there. The difference is the sin is no longer there. That means what? That you're not inclined to sin by those triggers anymore. The same triggers that by fault now brought you to the brink of sin every single time. Literally by default you were sinning if A, B, and C were happening. Now A, B, and C are there and you walk away sinless at that moment. Something is going on inside of you. There's elevation. There's progress. And that's a sure sign that you've been forgiven by God. As long as we pick up those signs, the signs are everywhere. We're not able to pick them up. You know, a man and the angel of death now have this conversation, okay? A man and the angel of death, Malak al-Maut, has this conversation. And he says to the angel of death, look, when you come and take my soul from my body, I will go. I won't fight you. I won't resist. It'll be a very smooth encounter. Provided you let me know when you're coming. Give me a heads up. The angel of death says, sure, no problem. Years and years and years pass, knock on the door. Angel of death says, let's go, it's time to go next world. He goes, wait, we had a deal. You never told me. There's not one message, not on my phone, not in my inbox, not in inbox. No one told me anything. I just a complete surprise. He goes, whoa, I didn't send you one message. I sent you several messages. The whitening of your beard, the bending of your back, the cracking of your knees, the bearing of your loved ones themselves. Was that not a sign? The death. So sometimes there's signs around us that we don't pick it up. There's signs of forgiveness inside of us that we are just oblivious to. Or I don't know what it is. Sometimes we're scared to let go of the past. Because that is the beast that I know. The future is the beast that I don't know. So I'd rather deal with the enemy that I do know as opposed to the enemy that I don't know. Follow me? But we're doing ourselves a grave injustice. And I'll say it one more time, paving our future with the mistakes of the past. And therein lies Shaitan, convincing us that God doesn't want to hear from you. God doesn't want to hear from you. I'll give you one example. I'll give this example before, inshallah, and then, inshallah, ittamas dua, and I'll read Masai. I want you to imagine that your father growing up placed restrictions on you. Told you that you don't want to be home by 11 o'clock. On a Friday night, if you're able to go out with your friends and wherever you want to go, somewhere halal, that you be home by 11. Like, okay, Dad, I'll be home by 11. Now you're out and you're having a good time, you're with your friends, blah, 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 you lose track of time, and you check your watch, it's 11:45, like, oh, God, I'm going to be late. By the time I get home, it'll be 12:15. So you rush home. 12:15, a good hour and 15 minutes late from your curfew. You roll into the house. It's pitch black. There's no sign of anyone being awake. You say, oh, thank God. You sneak into your bed. You fall asleep. And that's it. You wake up the next morning. It's Saturday. Your dad's home. You come downstairs. You hear him in the kitchen. What do? You go to every room in the house except for the kitchen. You avoid the kitchen. Is dad in the kitchen? Yeah, okay. Because you know that he knows that you know that he knows that you came home late last night. So you avoid him. You go to work every single day for the first few weeks, and you're late every single day by a good 15 minutes. You're logging in at 9:15. You should have started at 9 o'clock every day. And then your boss grabs you and says, look, Asad, you've been late for the past 7-8 days. Next time you're late, I'm going to give you a warning. No problem, sir. I won't be late tomorrow, I promise. The next day happens, I'm late 20 minutes. 20 minutes, I'm late now. I arrive in my building, I look around. I go, where? Where is he? He's in his office. Office is here. I go all the way around, and I get to my desk. I sign in like I've been there for a good half an hour. I avoid the office. Shaitan does the exact same thing to us. When we have moments where we've broken Allah's commands, moment where Allah has broken we've broken Allah's laws, moment where we have sinned, and then let's say for example I have a horrible Friday night, a horrible satanic Friday night, and I wake myself up for Fajr, and then at that moment Shaitan whispers in my ear, what? You just spent this whole night in sin with me. You're gonna wake up before the sun rises and say Allahu Akbar? You think God wants to hear from you? You think God's going to throw that slap back in your face? If I were you, buddy, I'd just slide myself back in the bed, curl up nice and warm in your blanket, and just crash it off. Go to sleep now. God doesn't want to hear from you. If I were you, I would turn my face away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes it works. He convinces us, yeah, you're right. Avoid my father, avoid my manager, avoid God. I don't want to hear it. The reality is that it's at that moment that God wants to hear from us. It's at that moment that Allah wants to hear from us. Think about it for a moment. Example I've given before. 3 o'clock in the morning. You got a phone call on your phone. It's never a good phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning. Sorry, yeah, how are you? No, it's usually bad news. On the other line of the phone is a good friend of yours, panting. He's fumbling in his words. He's stuttering. He's talking too fast. He's asking you to come and get me. I'm stuck somewhere. Come and get me. Can you please come and get me? So you grab your keys, you grab your wallet, you put a jacket on, you hop in a car, and you pick him up. You drop him off. He was in a bind. He called you for help. Follow the example, please. And days pass, and you think for a moment, wow, at 3 o'clock in the morning, when he was desperate, when he felt like, you know what, I have nobody, the first thought in his mind was to call me, right? You think, wow, like that's an announcement that I'm close to him. That's an announcement that if I trust nobody to come get me, I know that if anybody will come and get me, you'll come and get me. And you'll pull me out of this 3 a.m. rock bottom spot that I'm in and get me to my home. And that's why he called me. Otherwise, he wouldn't waste his time in calling me. Sometimes we hit rock bottom, guys. Sometimes we're scratching rock bottom. A lot of you right now, listen to me, are a mess spiritually. You're struggling. You're in doubt. You have so many questions and you don't know where to start even. You're going through the motions, but there's nothing really penetrating inside the heart. وَلَهُمْ قَلُوبًا لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. There's hearts, but there's nothing really deep inside the heart. And then, if at that moment, if at 3 a.m. your rock bottom call is to God, think about it for a moment. Please, I think about it for a moment. If your rock bottom call is to God, God, I have no business calling you. I have no business asking you. I have no business turning to you. But I know that you won't slam the door in my face. What God hears when you say that is that there's a deep-rooted love he has for me inside of him. He's just trying to figure things out. He knows that at rock bottom, when this man was desperate to get him out of this hole, the first entity he thought of was me. That's how much reliance he has of me. That's a positive thing. That's that one diamond, that one small jewel that shines amongst all the dirt and the mud, where you are now focused on the shining of the diamond. You get there, you clean it off, and you think, wow, that diamond's been sitting this whole time. But it took the dirt around you to see the brightness and the beauty of the diamond. Same idea. We have a jewel, we have a fitrah, an innate nature screaming for Allah, wanting to worship Allah. And for some reason, a lot of us suppress that voice. We try to destroy that voice. And sometimes when all the doors are closed, surrounded by dirt, it's that one jewel shining in our eye that's saying, labbaik. Go call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one way that shaitan misguides us from the back is that he makes us focus on our past, convinces us that we're worthless, convinces us that I am a horrible servant, I'm hypocritical. How can you sit there and worship Allah when you were 15, 16 years old, you were busy doing this? How can you do that? Whereas God now is obsessively telling us, please, I will forgive, I will forgive, I will forgive any sin. The only sin I'm not going to forgive is shirk, because you're no longer my child anymore. You're no longer within my domain anymore. You moved on to someone else, or you've attached partners to me. At that moment, I can't do anything. My hands are tied. Once you re-enter the realm of my tawheed, la ilaha illallah, I will jami'an forgive all of your sins, provided there's no game, provided you are sincere, regret, remorse, and a commitment to change. When you're ready, I will reroute you, reset the button, restart the phone, restart the machine, restart your spirituality. Doesn't matter how old you are. There's no retirement age when it comes to God. Nobody. If you lived 50 years of your life oblivious to God, and you decide, you know what, I want to start with God, start with God. الَّذِينَ جَاهِدُوا فِينَا لِنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. If you struggle in our path, God says, I'll open up doors for you. I'll extend paths for you. I will guide you to paths for you. I'll open up ways that you never thought even existed. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. I'll give you risk from a source that you never even thought existed. How many times has that happened to us? So my brothers and my sisters, these 2 nights now I've been with you, it's been my honor, and I'm very thankful to all of you for letting me into your homes. Identify the shaitan outside so you may understand the tactics of the shaitan inside. Then when this pandemic hits and election season hits, and you watch Yemen burn, and you watch Kashmir, and you watch the Muslims in China, you watch all these things, you're able to somehow process what's happening around us and not shut down like many of us have in this pandemic. and resort to mental health and anxiety and stress, which is an absolute, real phenomenon. But one portion, one dimension of it is for us to turn to God more. I'm not saying all of it. Of course, there is a professional realm. There's dua and there's dawa, right? As you've heard many, many, many times. There's prayer, and of course, there's actual ilaj and treatment. And it's this version of God that Imam Hussein would sacrifice his life for. 30 days have passed since the day of Ashura. This man gave everything he had, literally his last breath on the plains of Karbala on the day of Ashura, just so this version of God, the God of love, the God of compassion, even on that day, Ya ayyuta nafs al-mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan maradiyya. Return back to your, that's enough now, Hussein. Return back to your Lord, where I am radhi with you, you are radhi with me. I am content with you, you are content with me. What a loving God, endearing God, a compassionate God. Where do we get this idea that he wants to see us suffer, that he doesn't want to hear our call at 3 o'clock in the morning? Make God your 3 a.m. call, please. And watch your life change. Watch you elevate. Let go of the past. Forget about your grade 4 dinya teacher. Forgive the auntie that makes comments about how you raised your kid. Don't worry about some sayyid or some sheikh that answered your question incorrectly. All those people will have no impact on you in the hereafter. Now it's time for you to heal and release yourself of that and take off the weight and leave it at the base of the mountain and begin your climb free, knowing full well that my Lord has forgiven me and I am constantly reaching up towards him. Bibi Sakina was very near and dear to Imam Hussein. In a lot of ways, Imam Hussein was a manifestation of the love and the compassion of God. He's the hujjat of God at that moment. The love that he would show his daughter was incredible. At that emotionally charged arena, battling the enemy, for him to stop, and whenever he could remember, his sakina was incredible. There is no house, he would say, that is void of my sakina, and I'm not comfortable in that house. If sakina is in that house, there is contentment, there's sukoon in that house. Just a few minutes, inshallah. This is that same sakina that on the day of Ashura now, Imam Hussein is on his Zul-Jannah, ready to enter the Maidan of Karbala to sacrifice his life. And they said the Zul-Jannah would not move. Imam Hussein tried everything. Zul-Jannah wouldn't move, lowered his head almost as if to tell Imam Hussein that I am ready to serve you, Maula, but there is someone who is stopping me from going to the Maidan of Karbala. Imam Hussein looks down and a 4-year-old Sakina is grabbing onto the leg of the Zul-Jannah. Where are you taking my Baba? Imam Hussein gets off the Zul-Jannah. For the longest time growing up, I'd hear the masa'ib of the chest of Hussein. How she would love to sleep on the chest of Hussein, the shoulder of Hussein, in the arms of Hussein. I didn't quite understand that growing up, of course, until I had my own daughter. And I always say, whenever I read this masa'ib, I always mention this point. It breaks my heart that I remember vividly as my daughter was growing up, there would be nights where she was restless. She couldn't find her spot on the pillow. She was hot. She was cold. No matter what we tried, nothing would work until I picked her up and her head rested on my shoulder, and then she would fall fast asleep. That was her euphoria, that was her utopia, everything was there. And now I understand, at that moment of Ashur, Imam Hussein saying, Sakina, I have to go now. Baba, why can't we go back to Medina now? He would pick her up, hug her one more time. The same Sakina that wouldn't sleep until she slept on the chest of her father is now bidding farewell to her father. She would talk to the Zul-Jannah, say, Zul-Jannah, my Baba, please, my Baba's very thirsty. My Baba's very tired. He's been carrying mayyat after mayyat, shaheed after shaheed from morning to night. If you're able to take him to Farad for a glass, for an ounce of water, please do that. If you're able to find him some shade, do that. Imam Hussein says his khudafis and al-Bida to Sakina, and I would say, hey Sakina, enjoy that moment. The next time you see him is in the prison of Sham. Sheikh Abbas Qumi narrates that one night in the Zindan of Sham, on this very night, Bibi Sakina now is asleep, and she sees standing in front of her in her dream is her Baba, her beloved Baba. But Imam Hussein seems a little bit restless, a little bit uncomfortable. What's wrong, Baba? Is everything okay? You don't seem yourself. You know, Sakina, that without you there is no sukoon, there is no contentment. I miss you, my dear. I miss you, my daughter. He begins to cry. She begins to cry. She wakes up in the middle of the night, and she begins now to say, I can smell my Baba. I can see my Baba. Where is my Baba? She begins to cry. Zainab begins to cry. Kulthum begins to cry. The walls of the prison of Sham begin to cry. Yazid now says, what is this commotion? It's the daughter of Hussein. Bring her the head of her father. I don't know how she did it, but Bibi Sakina now is holding the head of Imam Hussein. Baba, who had put these scars on your face, Baba? Who separated your head from your body, Baba? And she clutches the head of her father, crying and crying and crying until Sakina, they're lying on the ground, holding on to the head of her father. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept this qaleel ibadat, inshaAllah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to please allow us the tawfiq to move on from our past and begin now to pave a very pious and God-centric future. Inshallah, we ask you, Allah, to weaken the hands of the enemies of humanity, to strengthen the oppressed and the mustaza'afin. And one dua we have, Allah. 30 days after the shahadat of Hussein of Karbala, we ask you, Allah, to make us worthy of the Hussein of our time. Allow us to stand beside the Imam when he comes. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alayka ya hujjat Allah fi arzi. Assalamu alayka ya ayna Allah fi khalqi. Assalamu alayka ya nur Allah الذي يهتدي به المهتدون ويفرج به عن المؤمنين. السلام عليك أيها المهذب الخائف. السلام عليك أيها الولي المحسن. السلام عليك أيها المهذب الخائف. السلام عليك أيها الولي المحسن. السلام عليك يا سفينة النجاة. السلام عليك يا أين الحياة. يا أين الحياة.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي ولت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيتم وبقي الليل والنهار. ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين.